I'm delighted to welcome to the studio, as I said, the Minister of State of the Department of Transport, Tourism and Sport, Alan Kelly. Thanks for dropping in, Minister.
Back again, George.
Yeah, well, back again, I hope, with firm news.
Absolutely.
You have firm news.
Absolutely, yes. Today, I suppose, we launched new branding on all taxis in Ireland, which will come into place next year. This is something that I flagged on your show a number of times. As you know, we had a taxi review committee which published a very comprehensive report. I'm sure you've read it.
Yeah, I laboured through it. But,
That's
Minister,
good.
to start off now, hold on now. That's cosmetic.
Oh, it's not cosmetic. What I'm about to tell you isn't cosmetic.
Okay.
Today was cosmetic in the sense that we displayed to all the taxi drivers in Ireland the actual signage that will be put on taxis.
Yeah.
It's only a very small part of the components and packages of the package. Really, the signage is to ensure that there's professionalism in taxis, that part-time taxi drivers in particular are going to have to take their occupation more seriously. They're not going to just willy-nilly be able to operate.
Just so I'm clear, the reason behind it really is, therefore, not to make the taxi look prettier, but rather make it more difficult for a fella to use his car Monday and Friday to drive to work, and Saturday, Sunday to put on the thing on top of it and say it's a taxi.
I think that's a very fair comment to make. There is additional issues too, though. I want the most professional drivers to be rewarded. I want those who are full-time drivers to be rewarded. Those who are full-time drivers, those who speak to me on this issue, know exactly where we're going with this and are supportive. Really, it is to make it more professional. It is also to ensure that those who are part-time do take it more seriously. But also it is to ensure there is compliance. So in the signage there will be numbers which reflect the actual vehicle number. So we will have technology early in the new year where anybody will be able to go up and will be able to, through an application on their phone, find out if the person behind the wheel of the car should be the person behind the wheel of the car, whether they're full-time or whether they're part-time. And I think that is an excellent initiative. On top of that, though, just so that people don't think it's just about that, there's a number of other issues. In the next couple of weeks, I will publish the most comprehensive taxi bill in the history of the state. It'll be far more comprehensive than anything that's ever been written. It will deal with the issue of criminality. It will upgrade regulations. It will deal with the whole issue of licensing. It will make a whole range of changes in the whole industry. It has been a labour of love. The volume of work that's gone into it has been huge, and I'll be publishing it in the next few weeks with implementation into it all early in the new year. On top of that, there is a number of changes as a result of the review that are actually coming into real effect on the 1st of January coming. For starters, you will no longer be able to sell your licence. The transferability will be gone. And I think that's crucial because I don't believe there should be a monetary value to a PSV licence. Second thing, and this is something that you and I have spoken about in great detail, the whole issue of renting of licences. The whole thing was a mess. The laissez-faire attitude of previous governments is gone. There is a whole package now. If you want to rent something, you're going to have to rent the package. So if George Hook wants to rent out a vehicle, he better take responsibility for doing so.
Yeah, I think I remember talking to you about this, and I made the point that the rental of licences happens in other jurisdictions, but in other jurisdictions, it's not the licence you're really renting, because you're renting the car, you're renting the entire system.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a different system here. Well, what's going to happen as follows is this. If George Hook rents out a car, the car and the licence are going to have to be matched. They're coming as a package. Not alone that, you're going to be responsible for the insurance of the car. You're going to be responsible for updating the NTA to who's driving that car. You're going to be responsible for all the technology in the car. And if you are not compliant, and if an enforcement officer or somebody finds out that somebody is behind the wheel of that car, you're the one who is going to be punished. And, I believe that if somebody is behaving in that way, they deserve to be dealt with, because we can't have these fly-by-nights anymore. On top of that, George, another very serious measure that's coming in on the 1st of January is the 9-year rule. Vehicles will have to be 9 years. If somebody is entering the market, obviously they have to have cars that are 3 years old or younger. But if somebody has a vehicle that is longer than 9 years and has purchased it prior to 2009, they have an exemption up to 14 years. But only, and there's only a very small amount of these people out there, only on the basis that they pass an MCT test every 6 months. But over a very short period of time, I don't foresee that is going to be an issue.
Okay, but Minister, the 9-year rule is one I've never been totally happy about, because a 9-year-old Rolls-Royce is clearly in much better shape than it'd be unfair to mention some other manufacturers, but then another manufactured car that somebody bought, that is a gad about for the vicar's wife. I mean, there's a huge difference between these two vehicles.
I agree, but you have to be fair also. I mean, taxi drivers have gone through a hard time. I see that, and I actually see it in the raw data. And you need to accept that, a lot of taxi drivers can't upgrade their vehicle at the moment, and that's what we had to do here. We have to compromise. I think it was fair. We took a lot of consultation on that issue, but at least I bit the bullet and we made a decision.
Yeah.
One thing I want to say that has, I haven't said to you before, George, over the last few months, I was absolutely intent on ensuring that there was sharing of data across government agencies in relation to taxis, so that the NTA would be sharing data with Gardaí, to help enforcement, with revenue, because there is fraud in the industry, with social protection, etc. And, I've learned an awful lot through that process. There is a level of criminality in the industry, there's a level of fraud, but by and large there is a huge volume of particularly full-time taxi drivers who are making it, who have it very difficult to make a living. Some have to draw on other supplementary welfare, for instance. And the whole idea of all of these qualitative measures which I have announced, which I'm implementing, and they are being implemented, people are seeing them being implemented, is to ensure that firstly, that the volume of taxis out there decreases because there is too many of them, particularly in urban areas, and secondly, those who are behind the wheel of a taxi that shouldn't be, will be taken out.
Yeah, the question, surely, and I applaud this, because everybody knows that, as you rightly point out, a laissez-faire attitude has existed in previous governments, and if you are, as you suggest, bringing this kind of comprehensive legislation, then the beneficiaries are not just taxi drivers, but the people who use taxis, because it's quite possible, if there's fraud in the system, people could be sitting in a motor car that is uninsured, or could be driven in a car that is driven by a criminal, and if you can stamp that out, you're making it safer for the users. But you did address, and I'm glad you did with a prompting, that at the root of the problem is oversupply. That is at the very root. Now, how do you fix that?
Well, to be honest with you, it is at the root of it. And, a lot of people will say you have a quick fix, you buy them out. I mean, it's simply not plausible in this environment. Secondly is that you look at other measures to cap them in certain areas. There's a whole load of legislative and legal reasons why many of those aren't available to us, particularly in relation to competition law, both nationally and at European level. What you're really having to do, pardon the pun, is to keep it between the ditches as regards the legislation that is there to protect people from, and the competition legislation on one side, and the practicalities that there is too many taxis out there on the other side. And in doing so, what I have come up with is a whole range of regulatory measures, qualitative measures. There's 46 recommendations in this report that are all going to be implemented. And through that process and those layers of changes, we will deal with them. But backed up, by the way, by very, very tough and comprehensive legislation. Criminality is going to be stamped out. And that is critical.
One of the taxi drivers are great. I mean, they're like barbers. They're like barbers. They're great to talk. So, a story that starts with one taxi driver by the time it reaches you, has been a bit embellished, and I get great fun. But at the root of the stories is a real concern that there are taxi drivers out there who can't make a living despite working at it full time, and a belief that when there is a bit of business out there on Friday and Saturday nights, there are guys coming out who have other jobs or whatever. The thing to that, and I was interested in hearing you talk about it, will we be able to have computers at welfare talk to computers at revenue, talk to computers at transport?
It's happening, George. Right. I ensure it's happening. It is already happening. The data is being transferred. The analysis is going on as we speak. But there is a number of issues there which will also help. For starters, the signage we brought out today means the following: that those who are operating in the industry with maybe a 9 or 10-year-old vehicle that isn't of the standard required, isn't clean, that they adopted as a method of getting a few extra bob at big weekends when there's big matches on or big events like the Jazz Festival or events in Galway or events in Dublin or wherever. Those people, they'll have to now consider their position, because the signage on their vehicle is going to, you can't be just taken on and off willy-nilly. They can't just drive up into the local car park and not let their neighbours know they're a taxi driver and put on the sign on the roof anymore. And it's not going to work like that. They have to take a far more professional approach. Secondly, as part of the regulations we're bringing in, anyone who is working is going to have to notify their employer under the Working Time Act that they are driving the taxi as well. And their employer is going to have to make a decision then on whether they agree with that.
And, when you say they're going to have to do that, what about if they don't? How do we know that part-time taxi driver A has told his employer or not that he's driving a taxi on weekends?
Well, it's part of the licence renewal process, so they'll have no choice. They have to do it, and they.
So when they come in to renew their licence, they will have to bring some kind of a letter.
Well, the authority of the company, relevant company, and particularly this applies to public sector, will have to say that they are aware that this is happening.
All right, because you will now know that this taxi driver has another job. Mm-hmm. You will know.
Yeah.
What the thing about, again, forgive me referring to America, but there was a great movie called Taxi Driver with Robert De Niro.
I saw it recently again.
Yeah, and he would come home at the end of, he would come back at the end of work, like most New York taxi drivers, to effect an office, a warehouse. He'd park up the car and then he'd go home by whatever means of transport. He didn't take the taxi home. Are you worried that what you will do is you will create an environment like New York where most of the taxis are in fact owned and run by large conglomerates?
No. In fact, the opposite is what I believe. Secondly, it's not something that I would be in favour of. And thirdly, to be direct about it, I suppose, George, this is New York. And this is Ireland. This is Dublin, Cork, Limerick and Waterford who have particular problems in Galway. But also we have the lack of supply in rural areas, which has been addressed by me as well. There's a lack of supply. I come from a little village in Portroe. No taxis. And there's lots of places like it, and not just in Tipperary but around the country. So we have to deal with that too. I firmly believe, and I hope you appreciate this, George, and I know a lot of taxi drivers do, because I get in and out of taxis all the time, that nobody has dealt with or spoken to as many taxi drivers as I have. Previous governments really just didn't want to get into the intricacies of a very complicated and messy legacy of regulations and lax legislation. And I've had to dive through all of this in minute detail with a number of other people in order to come up with the best solutions for the industry in the current standard, and that's what these are.
The situation of regulation we've now covered in detail. Without enforcement, it's worthless. Mm-hmm. Can you guarantee the enforcement will match the regulation?
Yes, and you're right about that. I think that's a very fair point. Enforcement is changing. There is, under the Act, there will be, under the bill that I'll be bringing in, there will be changes in relation to that. There's a greater role for the Gardaí. There's more fixed penalty points. The Gardaí will be backing up the enforcement office from the NTA. There has been changes in the structures in the NTA, which has been brought about in the last few months in relation to, how they deal with the industry as well, which I very much welcome. I know a number of the unions and taxi drivers are also welcome. But the enforcement is going to be much more improved. It has to be, because without it being backed up, it wouldn't. The regulations wouldn't be worth it. You're right.
All right. Thank you so much for joining me. The Minister of State has